Are you okay, hon? Hmm. Anyway, so we're going to spend the next month or two pondering the wilderness because that's what the world is in many respects. And as we reach Easter, it gets interesting. We're going to change the angle slightly. We're going to move into liminal spaces with Jesus. Oh, that'll be interesting. Anyway, we'll get to that. So I started thinking about the wilderness, and I started thinking about the story of salvation. And I saw the wilderness is a recurring theme within the Bible. It's pretty much from the off, God's people experience the wilderness. And I talked to a few other people about this, the kind of list of people that also come in and share messages on Sunday mornings. And they started reeling off all these people from the Bible that also experienced these moments when everything seemed changed, everything seemed different, and they were lost and had to find their way back. Oh, that's another song I could have used, isn't it? Anyway, we'll come back to that. So we're going to start today and see where we wander and for how long, because you know how the angel one ended up being about a year long, didn't it? So we'll start wandering in the wilderness and see where it takes us. And we start, obviously, at the very, very beginning. We start in Genesis, when the first woman and the first man get their taste of desolation as they're cast out from the Garden of Eden. Let me read it. It's in Genesis chapter 3. He says, trying to sound confident. But if you're not confident, just be honest about it. I'm not going to read the whole bit, but you know the story so far, up to Genesis 3. You may not think you do, but you do. Because the Adam and Eve in the garden are told not to eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, or the tree of life. And of course, what do? They go and eat from the fruit. They eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge, tempted by the serpent, the snake. They both eat of the tree, and God finds them out. And they're hiding because they've realized all of a sudden that they're naked and that God's there, and that they don't know what's going on, and they know too much. It's not they know too much, they just know now. So God puts these, you could say punishments. I don't know if they are punishments. Well, I guess it's a consequence of, isn't it? But God says these things are going to happen now because you know this much, because you're like us. Things are going to change because knowledge changes us, doesn't it? If you think about what you knew when you're 8 years old and what you knew when you're 30 years old, it changes you, not just because you're older, because you know things, you know better, hopefully, how the world works. So anyway, I'm going to start from Genesis 3, verse 19. Until you return from, this is God speaking, you turn from the ground, dead and buried. You started out as dirt, and you'll end up as dirt. The man known as Adam named his wife Eve because she was the mother of all the living. God made leather clothing for Adam and his wife and dressed them. God said, the man has become like one of us, capable of knowing everything, ranging from good to evil. What if they now should reach out and take fruit from the tree of life and eat and live forever? Never. This can't happen. So God expelled them from the Garden of Eden and sent them to work the ground, the same dirt of which they'd been made. He threw them out of the garden and stationed angel cherubim and a revolving sword of fire east of it, guarding the path to the tree of life. Oh, it's good. And it's got a lightsaber. But isn't that fantastic? I love that. I think that's great. I'm going to put that. It's good. It's good stuff. So I looked at that story. It's only a minor incident, isn't it? But it's one of those hinge points. It's like, what, half a dozen verses? But in those half a dozen verses, everything changes. Before that moment, everyone's in, well, Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden. It's paradise, isn't it? The animals are walking about, the fruits on the trees. You don't have to work. You don't have to go to work. There's no emails, nothing. There's no text. There's no people trying to scam you. It's perfect. It's always sunny. No one gets sunburn. And then 6 verses later, God's like, that's it, you're out. So what I did is, what I often do in these moments, is I took to the goggle to see what the pictures there are about it. Because I like pictures. I like to see how people have interpreted the story. And I'm going to show you 2 batches. The first one, there's something I noticed. It's not directly related to this theme. It's something I noticed, and I just wonder if you can spot it. So I'm just going to show you a few pictures now, just to pick this up, and then we'll get back onto the main theme. Let me share the screen again. I'll stay on screen so we can wave. Share screen with that one. There we go. Have a look at these pictures. See what if you notice anything. There is a bit of a delay because I put a 20-second gap between each thing. There we are. Here we go. Very nice. That's very what's the word? That Macintosh sort of stuff. 1950s thing, isn't it? Art Deco, that's it. It's a big angel there. Very big angel there, isn't it? That's probably on a roof somewhere. Look at that skull. I never noticed that skull before. That's interesting. Yeah. Let's see what they've done there. Ooh, looking very upset there. Oh, very upset. Don't kick me out. And that's like, leg it. He's got a lightsaber. Right. Now then, I was looking at that. That's the kind of the first grab of pictures. So you goggle it, and that's the first set that come up. Do you know what I noticed? And this is nothing to do with wilderness. They're all white Europeans. Did you notice that? You may ask why I'm mentioning this when we're on another subject, but it's because I think we need to be aware of our unnoticed assumptions, both culturally and regarding our faith. It'd be easy. I could show you hundreds of pictures of Adam and Eve, and particularly, and even ironically, from a conservative theological point of view, they're all white people. But Adam and Eve are unlikely to have looked anything like that. Now, I know there is an element of we've got to try and understand Jesus as like us. Yeah, that's fair enough. But we have this picture in our head, don't we, of a white European Adam and Eve, just as we do as a white European Jesus. And in one sense, that's okay. But in another sense, you've got to think, well, actually, I don't know, are we imposing stuff here? See, as God's people, we're called to stand for justice and for truth, and not for misrepresentations of our faith and our ancestors in the faith. Now, I'm not just ranting, so don't switch off quite yet. What I'm asking is that we think about what we see whenever we're reading something, when someone's saying, this is what the Bible's saying, this is what Jesus is like, this is what things look like. We say to ourselves, is that right? How much have we overlaid our assumptions, whatever our background, actually? How many of our assumptions and our upbringing and our kind of things that we just absorbed, have we just layered on top of that? Now, I know that the Black Lives Matter movement has upset and frustrated some people. But if you have any doubt of the kind of idea of white supremacy, if you have any doubt about that and think it's just a storm in a teacup, just look at what happened in America on Wednesday. That massive crowd of white people stormed the Capitol building. And then you compare that, I'm not the first person to draw this parallel. You compare that with when the Black Lives Matter protests were on, and you had lines of riot police, and none of the army were there. But you compare how those two groups were treated. And one of them was just on the street doing, protesting. The other one were actually attacking the center of government, and they just let them do it. So you've got to ask yourself, what is going on? Who is in power and why? And why do they let these people get away with that behavior, but those people don't get away with behavior that is nothing compared? White power is a thing. It is a thing. And I'm not having a go at anyone. And I'm not, I think what I'm saying is think about what we do in our attitudes. We're called to build a fair and a just world. We're called to build the kingdom of God as close as we can here. And prejudice has no place in it. You see how our faith, particularly the last 5 or 6 centuries, has been on the side of white power, the colonizing of places, the invasion of countries. You can see how the church has been used or got into bed with these political powers. Now, I'm not suggesting we all go on rallies. I'm suggesting that we listen to what God is saying. Just as God spoke out about slavery and emancipation for women and against human trafficking and fair trade, all these things that people go, it's just all lefty stuff. It's not. It's about justice. It's not a political wing thing. It's about doing the right thing. Anyway, that was just a little side footnote. And it's not just about that. And I think by being aware of these issues, it makes us more aware of how we treat anyone who is different. The LGBTQ community, refugees, people who are out of work, people that live in certain parts of, the city on estates or wherever, color of their skin. You start thinking, well, actually, I have assumptions about all these groups. And that's not the way God sees us. How can I see others with God's eyes? Anyway, get back to the other theme here, which is wilderness. Here's a fairer now. Here's your main slideshow. Here's a fairer and broader set of images that tell of this expulsion from paradise and how humankind were cast out from the Garden of Eden into the wilderness. You'll also notice that Adam has been down the gym a lot in this moment. So I'm going to play you. It's got a banging soundtrack as well. You'll like this if you like kind of 70s. I don't know if it's glam rock or not, but anyway, you're going to like it. It's got a banging soundtrack. It takes a minute or so. It's less than 2 minutes. Let's have a broader view, a broader take on the story of Adam and Eve being kicked out of the garden. Are you ready for this? Let's see if I can share screen. We're sharing screen. Go.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Iron Butterfly.
That was a banging soundtrack, wasn't it? Anyway, so there's a load of images there. There's some. I like the first one with the kids was quite interesting, wasn't it? But there's different takes. And did you notice there's a different feel, isn't there, to the different pictures? They give a different kind of flavour to things. The last one, which I'll show you this one again, because this is my favourite one. This is by a painter called Cole. And if you Google it, it's Cole, C-O-L-E, Expulsion from the Garden of Eden. You can see, you can zoom in and look in more detail on it. This is my favourite kind of picture. Vicky's just spotted that song is also played on The Simpsons. Yeah, it's true. Lorraine, I'll come back to the All Lives Matter in a bit. So yeah, this picture it's my favorite picture of the expulsion from the garden, and you probably can't see. I can't even point. Well, actually, I can get my mouse there. Down here is the two figures just kind of going out, and they're like this in the windswept. And I think for me, I love this picture because you've got that contrast, haven't you, between the this kind of light green lush paradise, and then there's volcanoes and barren windswept trees and landscape. So they're leaving with nothing and no skills out into the cold and the darkness. It's a powerful image, I think, and however you understand the story in terms of I guess what you think actually happened, it gets the idea across about loss, doesn't it? When your world caves in. The story of Adam and Eve tells that story about, well, what do we do when the world does this to us? So as we start this new lockdown, this new exile that we're in, it does feel like we've been here before. But even so, it still stretches out uncertain, doesn't it? There's little comfort. And seeing the news, well, they'll all be vaccinated by the autumn. Well, that's an aim, and so far we haven't got a good track record on getting things done in time. But you think, well, how long? How long will this be? So what we're going to do is what we should always do, is return to our story of salvation. Because we've got a story that's different, a narrative that is not hopeless or alone. We've got a story for this world of God's love and presence. We've a story in our book, and we find echoes for it in our lives. So over the next couple of months, we're going to look at when God's people kind of wandered out or were forced into the wilderness. And we'll be reminded that we are not the first ones to tread here, that our ancestors in the faith have gone before us. Eve and Adam and Sarah and Abraham and Moses and Deborah and David and Ruth and Jonah and Jesus. They also know the wilderness, and they can help us walk it. So for me, the story from the Garden of Eden, the expulsion, it almost gives me pain, a sadness. It's like a parent when they have to put their child on the naughty step, isn't it? And it kind of hurts. And this is the first wilderness of time. And for God as a new parent, this is the first time that the children have done this. So however you understand the story in close up, if you stand back and look, it's this point is the beginning, not the garden. The garden, I think, is kind of the background story, the slip road before we get onto the main drive. And the main drive is the story of how we walked away from God and start on this mammoth journey through the wilderness back to God. And the story echoes through the Bible, let alone the 40 years in the wilderness and the exile and the cross. Throughout the Bible, there's this journeying back to God. How do we find him? Now, it does raise the question, I think, of why did God put us through this? And that is a good question. But the answer is really a conversation. It's not like, here's the answer, blah, blah, blah. To give you my edited answer, I would say God didn't put us through this. It's a consequence of what we're like. And secondly, it's because this way we can choose God. The human race grows up in this story and starts to choose God. If we were still innocent children in the garden, well, that's okay, but we wouldn't know much else. This journey, like any child goes on, is about working out who they are and who they love and where their home truly is. So don't despise the wilderness. It is a place to get lost in, yes, but it's also a place to be found. So when I hear the story of the expulsion from Eden, it feels like rejection and failure, like punishment. It's grim and it's cold, which I suppose is why that picture kind of connects for me. We're then pushed out into this raging cold. And why? It's because they knew too much. Not too much in general, but too much to be children anymore. They are no longer children, and now the humans have to find their own way, their own life, their own identity, just as kids do. And that is difficult. It is easier in the short term for someone else to define and shape us, to tell us what to think and what to eat and how to behave and who are our enemies and who we should like and who we should trust. Coming of age, and it rarely happens at 18 or 21, coming of age is when we start to think for ourselves, when we start to form our own views. And these are uncertain and lonely places that we find ourselves in. And we find ourselves in those places at regular points in our lives, if we're growing, if we're changing. Because it's difficult leaving the comfort of someone else's opinion to seek truth. The first wilderness that humans face is the one to survive, to discover their own identity and place, to stand on their own 2 feet. This moment was the humans leaving the family home. And that's painful. And interestingly, possibly more painful for the parent than the child. But there's also this kind of taste. I don't know if you get it. It tastes like rejection, doesn't it? That God has booted them out and by association has booted us out as well. And this isn't helped by the church's historic love of the doctrine of original sin, which is basically that all humans are inherently bad, awful, terrible people. And somehow we have inherited this sin that Adam and Eve committed. Although, let's be honest, the patriarchal wing of the church has somehow conspired further to make it Eve's fault. It's not my fault. It's women, isn't it? They started it. But the idea that humans are born sinful or born evil, well, if you want my considered view on it, I can't be doing with it. It's nonsense. It's a 3rd century invention that has been weaponized and used to control people. In the Bible I read, which is actually the same as the Bible everyone else reads, well, maybe the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses. In the Bible I read, God made the world and us, and he saw that we were good. You are good. That doesn't mean you're a perfect person, that we're perfect people, that we don't get it wrong. But at our core, in our default design, we are good, beloved children of God. But if that's the case, why would God reject us? Why would he evict us? Why would he expulse us? Is that a word, expulse? Why would he kick us out of the garden? Well, the time had come. We'd learnt the score. We'd learned what was right and wrong. We'd grown up. And the time had come for us to make our own decisions. In the story, there's a transition from being children playing in the garden to adults working and cooperating together, caring for one another. building communities. No longer is God just walking about patting us on the head, because it's now you go and duplicate this, what you've seen here of my love for you, share that there. You now know how to do it. It is difficult growing up, isn't it? I'm resisting it. When your grandparents stop giving you pocket money, feels like the end of an era, doesn't it? It's usually in your 20s, but that probably makes it worse, doesn't it? But that's what this wilderness was. It's a grow up. So what of the wilderness then, as we start this season? Because we're going to pray in a moment. First, you don't leave the wilderness the same as you entered it. It changes you, just as this last year will have changed us. For some of us, it will have traumatized us. Others, it have opened up maybe new ways of living or thinking. For some of us, it's been full-on work overload. For some of us, it's been oddly easy. And for some of us, perhaps it didn't feel that different. But we will have changed. Embrace that and grow from it, because things aren't going to just slip back in the next 3 or 6 or 12 months. Let's grow. And secondly, we're not alone. We've journeyed together. We've known that God is still with us. We've gained new friends on the way. We are not and will never be abandoned. However others may have treated you or let you down, however you may feel you've wandered off, you're not alone. One of my favorite parts of that story, there's this tender moment when, recognizing their embarrassment, God gently clothes and covers his children. He makes them. He doesn't nip down the shop or go on the internet and buy them. He makes the clothes. He doesn't say, go off and sort yourselves out. He makes the clothes and he wraps it around them. And it made me think, you can't put clothes on someone else without hugging them, can you? How different is it when someone hands you your coat, or they hold it for you and put it on you? God does that. He didn't say, here, I'll put that on. He goes, here, I'll put that on you. God doesn't push us away alone into the wilderness. His arm is already around us. It's a place where we grow up, where I grow up. I learn to think for myself, yes, hopefully. I also learn to cooperate together, to work with those I'm with. So these next few weeks, it's good to see your comments there. Light a candle. These next few weeks up to Lent, we're wandering off into the wilderness. We're going to bump into some other people. You'll be surprised at how many people enter the wilderness in their journey with God, and how many of those during that time discovered more of God's love and grace. So get up, get walking, and we're going to walk together and see what we find on the way and who we meet on the way, where we end up. So before we finish, someone mentioned the Black Lives Matter and the question which some people have raised, so don't all lives matter? And actually, yes, they do. And that's kind of the point of the Black Lives Matter, is that all lives do matter, but some lives seem less important. So if you look proportionally, particularly in America, but I think in this country as well, proportionally, if everyone is equal and everyone's of equal importance, why are there disproportionate numbers of Black people being shot by police in America, disproportionate numbers in prison? Because there's racist assumptions underlying those, that Black people are more criminally inclined, Black people aren't as clever, Black people cause trouble. Those sorts of assumptions, Black people choose to live this way. So those assumptions, which are racist assumptions, then get translated into the way people are treated. So if someone sees, you see this during the movement, someone sees a Black person on their street, they rang the police up, and then the police come and shoot them They see a white person on the street they don't recognize, then they ring the police. So the Black Lives Matter saying, look, it's as if you think it is that you think Black lives don't matter. So it's raising the issue. The best analogy I saw for that is if I ran out in the street saying, my house is on fire, quick, help my house, sort me, help put the fire out my house. And someone goes, well, why should we help you? All houses matter. So the point is that this particular point in history, this group, this part of the human race needs to be treated fairly, needs justice. So we will focus on that, just as we'll focus on other countries or other communities. And so at this point, this needs more help, needs more support. We need to sort this out. You know, I've got loads of pipes in my house for central heating. If this one's leaking, that's the one that's the most important one right now. All the other pipes are actually just as important, but I'm going to fix that pipe right now because that's the one that isn't right. So that's the idea of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's saying at this point, this group of people are being treated unfairly. It's not right. Let's put that right. So hopefully that explains it.